This week, the president embraced the so-called talking filibuster, as the Washington Post put it, a delaying tactic immortalized in movies and some legendary legislative battles that has fallen into disuse. It was spurred by a growing conclusion that his ambitious agenda, from climate action to immigration reform to civil rights, will otherwise meet a quick death. Here's what the president said.
I don't think you have to eliminate the filibuster. You have to do it what it used to be when I first got to the Senate and back in the old days when you used to be around there. And that is that a filibuster, you had to stand up and command the floor. And you had to keep talking alone. You couldn't call for, no one could say, quorum call. Once you stopped talking, you lost that, and someone could move in and say, I moved the question of. So you got to work for the filibuster.
Washington Post coverage quoted my next guest as saying, this is not something that just helps Democrats. This is something that helps the Senate. It makes the Senate an institution that can function again. So said Burt Neuborne, the founding legal director at the Brennan Center for Justice. Professor Neuborne is a professor at New York University Law School, currently teaching in the spring at the Berkeley School of Law. Professor, thank you so much for your time. You're also the author of Madison's Music, and it's good to have you here.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be here.
I don't want to take for granted that a lay audience knows what the filibuster is. I think that the word gets bandied about with this assumption that people know, oh, I get it, the 60 vote threshold. In very basic terms, can you spell it out?
Sure. Filibuster is a Dutch word for pirate. And it meant that someone who seized the floor and held it, the same way you would capture a ship, you would capture the floor of the Senate and not leave it. And that would enable you to continue talking about a bill and prevent the Senate from actually reaching the merits of the bill. Because if you could stall it by talking long enough, maybe the Senate would go off and take some other business.
In January, you co-authored an essay with Professor Chemerinsky, which was under the headline, Make the Filibuster Difficult Again. If President Biden gets his wish, is that exactly what you had in mind?
Sure. Once upon a time, when Biden entered the Senate, and for most of the time that a filibuster was open in the Senate, it was a complex mechanism. The person that wanted to run it seized the floor, just like a pirate, and held the floor until his opponents could get enough votes to make him stop. That froze the Senate so often that the Senate decided they would reform it. And they reformed it by creating what I call the Zipless Filibuster, which means that it's easy. You don't have to, all you do is throw a switch and announce to the majority leader that you hereby filibuster. And as long as you hold the floor for 1 hour a day, that then freezes the bill. So it takes all the effort out of the filibuster. And so slowly but surely, the use of the filibuster went up until it now is the normal way the Senate operates. The Senate is operating now on a de facto 60-vote test. You can't pass legislation unless you can get 60 votes. And that's very different from the old filibuster, which was 50 votes, but you could hold it up for a very long time and maybe make it go away if you were heroic enough in holding the floor and refusing to let go.
In other words, we very generously give you the benefit of the doubt that you have the wherewithal to get on your feet and to do what Strom Thurmond famously did, except in modern instance, all you need do is throw that switch.
That's right. Strom Thurmond held the floor for 24 hours. And by the way, he lost. They passed the Civil Rights Bill of 1959. He held it up for 24 hours with a heroic effort, and it eventually passed. Now, sometimes it works because you can do it in tandem. If you get a tag team of a couple of senators who are willing to do it, you can hold the floor indefinitely and prevent something from passing. But historically, it was a rare occurrence and done only when senators passionately opposed something to the point where they were willing to freeze the Senate. And the other thing is that it had to be done in the glare of publicity. You had to stand up on the floor and talk. and talk and talk and talk and talk, and people were listening. The current filibuster, you simply tell the majority leader, I am filibustering, the switch is thrown, you have to say something for a couple of minutes each day, and that's the end. So it's so easy to do now. It's absolutely painless.
In the essay that I referenced that you wrote with Professor Chemerinsky, which I'm making available in my social media platforms because I thought it was the best short encapsulation of the history, you drew attention to the year 1975. Beginning in 1975, though, the original speaking filibuster was transformed into the modern version. What is it that gave rise to the change?
Two things. First, the idea that there would be only a small period each day when you had to be on the floor and speak. In other words, the Senate broke itself into two tiers, a morning tier and an afternoon tier. And the morning tier is only about an hour long. And it's that period that you have to hold the floor for the filibuster. For the rest of the time, the Senate can do anything it wants, but the filibuster is deemed to be in effect. The second thing is that it used to be that if somebody voted for cloture to end the filibuster, if somebody voted to force the bill to a vote, they had to maintain the people that were maintaining the filibuster had to maintain 33 votes. They had to get a third of the Senate. In 1975, that changed, and it went to 60 votes. So it looked like it went down from 67 to 60, but they flipped the burden. So now if you want to stop the filibuster, you have to get 60 votes on the floor. Before, if you wanted to sustain the filibuster, you had to get 41 votes, which meant that you had to keep your people on the floor. Not only did you have to speak, but the people who were supporting the filibuster had to be there with you, because you could do a snap vote, and if you didn't have 41 people on the floor, you would lose the filibuster. So now the people who are supporting the filibuster can stay home in bed, and the people who are trying to break the filibuster have to get 60 people on the floor. So go ahead.
Leaders of both parties like to blame the other for the break with, I'll say, tradition. Is one party more at fault than the other for getting away from the original intention, or like so many other things, does the truth fall somewhere in the middle?
Well, this is, I think, a Democratic Party decision. They were desperately trying to pass civil rights legislation, and they were willing to do anything to be able to lower the threshold and stop the Senate from being completely frozen. And so they had their pockets picked by the liberal Democrats had their pockets picked by the conservative Democrats, who sold them this as a reform measure. And they thought that they were actually moving forward and making it easier to vote on civil rights legislation. And in fact, they wound up with a system that made it impossible to vote on anything. And I don't think they saw it coming. It was Mike Mansfield in 1975.
Professor, we have abolished this process for Supreme Court nominations and select other circumstances, true?
Right. For executive appointments, cabinet appointments, for example, used to be able to be filibustered. Now they can't. Judicial nominations used to be filibustered. Now they can't. So, and it can be changed by 50 votes, by a majority of the Senate plus the vice president. So it can be done by a majority vote if they want to change it.
That seems a little odd. I understand that we're talking about rules, not legislation, but in order to change this fundamental rule requires only a simple majority. And in the process, you get rid of not quite 2/3, but a 60 vote threshold.
Yes.
Do you see the sort of the oddity of that?
Well, you hit it right on the head, Michael. The rule itself has something called the Entrenching Provision, which says you can't change this rule except by a 2/3 vote of the Senate. And that's still there. This is Rule 22 of the Senate. It still has an entrenching provision that says 2/3. President Nixon, Vice President Nixon, when he was vice president in 1957, and he was presiding over the Senate, issued an advisory opinion that was unconstitutional. that you could not freeze the Senate and require a 2/3 vote to change it, that the Senate had the right to change things by a majority vote. Nixon did it twice, in 57 and 59, and Humphrey did it in 69, and Rockefeller did it in 75. They were all efforts to push the filibuster, to reform the filibuster. You know, Vice President Harris could do it today. She could be the force that started this going if she were to issue an advisory opinion that the existing filibuster is unconstitutional because it's a de facto 60-vote rule, and then they would have to negotiate about what would fix it.
Boy, I clearly have the right person with whom to address this subject. So thank you for being gracious with your time. Just an additional question or two, if I may. I'll bet you saw Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this week on the issue, warning against any change. And I'll simplify by taking away from his piece the idea that what goes around comes around. I interpreted it as a bit of a threat to say to Democrats, if you do this, as soon as we Republicans have control of the White House, we'll undo everything that you've just done, and the pendulum will swing wildly, lacking the sort of differentiation between the way the House functions and the way the Senate is supposed to function. Any thought on that?
Well, I mean, it's a gamble. The filibuster protects the minority party. Now, whoever is in the minority in the Senate can use the filibuster to dig in. And so if you take it away, the day that you are the minority party, you're going to rue the fact that you don't have the filibuster anymore. The balance is the fact that the Senate is now a frozen body that requires 60 votes to do anything, which means it doesn't do anything. It doesn't pass anything. If you want a frozen body, then you keep the existing structure. The suggestion that Erwin Chemerinsky and I have is that you don't have to throw the filibuster out. You can give the minority party significant protection. You just don't have to give it a complete veto where it stops the Senate from acting entirely. Let it, as it did in the old days, in the speaking filibuster days, when a minority party feels strongly enough about something, they can organize and they can hold the floor. But don't just say any member of the Senate just flips a switch and the Senate is frozen at 60 votes.
Professor Neuborne, help me frame the issue then for my radio listeners and callers. What is the calculus right now for Democrats? Distill the issue that they must address.
They have to decide whether the future of Biden's agenda is worth the risk of the fact that when they become a minority party, they're going to wish they had the filibuster back. So if they can push through Biden's agenda on very, very narrow majority votes, is that worth it to them as a party? Taking the risk that someday, when they will be in the minority again, the Republicans will do that to them.
Professor Burt Neuborne, author of Madison's Music, professor at New York University Law School, now temporarily on the West Coast teaching at Berkeley. That was excellent. What a great tutorial. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.